Hello everyone and welcome back to JB's Total Gaming, where today I have a proposition that I don't think is all that controversial. We are into April now, so we've made it through the first quarter of the year, and I think 2017 may have the strongest first quarter for video gaming of any year ever. It may seem like a pretty strong statement, but usually video games, the big bulk of the really good special games come out in the Christmas rush, and in the early part of this year, which is usually kind of a dead part of a year, we've had a lot of great games, which means 2017 is shaping up to possibly be the best game for video gaming all year, and maybe the most anticipated title to come out this year is Mass Effect Andromeda, and sadly, this is not one of the games that a lot of people are all that excited about. There's a lot of hate for this game out there. I'm going to try to briefly review all of the games I want to talk about that have come out so far this year. Now here's the deal. People have hated on the animation of this game and some of the writing of this game. Yes, the whole my face is tired thing. And look, Mass Effect Andromeda is a little bit disappointing. It's probably going to be disappointing no matter what it did because people's memories of the Mass Effect series are built up and they probably forget some jankiness and some poor writing in some of the earlier games. But admittedly, there are some issues with this game I didn't expect for a AAA game of this size. That being said, however, if you stick with the game and keep going, the story gets better, and whether or not you like the characters, the writing gets a little bit better. There's a lot of dialogue, and yeah, some of it is bad. Some of the animations are bad, including the facial animations, but overall it's a pretty solid game, so I give Mass Effect a not as good as your nostalgia, but still pretty decent. Alright, next up, I figure we would cover the other most anticipated game of the year, Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, why am I not showing footage of this game? Well, because Nintendo will claim it no matter what I do, even if it's a brief amount of footage with no audio, and I talked about that in one of my other videos. But Breath of the Wild is a game that I've been on record as saying it's not as amazing as everybody says it is, in my opinion. However, that being said, don't let it be mistaken. I think Breath of the Wild is an amazing game. I've had several very lengthy conversations with my son, who has played the game quite a bit as well, and he loves it. Look, the game is great, but it has its flaws, and well, I've pointed out some of those flaws, some of the... I have some issues with the UI, that circle above your head. I think there's not enough stamina and weapons to grade too quickly early in the game. And, well, I think there's just a little too much fluff with all the seeds in the dungeons with the same exact tile sets. And I have some other issues with it. However, these are things I'm pointing out to say why I don't think this game is a 10 out of 10, and it really shouldn't have gotten as many 10 out of 10s as it did. However, this game is really amazing, and bringing Zelda to the open world was the right choice, and while I think they made a few poor choices along the way, I understand what they were trying to do, and I think the weapon degradation system is forcing you to use a bunch of different weapons, which is a good thing, but the lack of stamina, especially early, and those weapons breaking very quick, can, I think, sometimes exclude players from gameplay, make them not want to get into fights, not want to climb that mountain because they're not sure if they'll fall off and die. And, well, but the thing is, at the end of the day, Zelda is amazing, and that's why my score for Zelda is going to be a pretty darn close to 10 out of 10. I don't think it deserves it, but it's still a pretty amazing game. Alright, next up we have what up until now has been the #1 selling game of the year. Mass Effect may have been at this point, I'm not sure, and it's mostly been that probably because it's been available for all the systems where Zelda isn't. But, well, we're talking about Ghost Recon Wildlands, and here's the deal. There's fun to be had in this game. If you get in this game with multiple friends who have the game and you all work together, then yeah, you can have fun, just like any cooperative multiplayer shooter can be fun with your friends because your friends are fun. At least, hopefully they are. But, well, this game doesn't really have a lot to offer. It's just a big open world sandbox, and it's not really filled with a lot. The same sort of missions over and over again. Stupid AI that's easy to take out. It's just not very good, and even though it's sold really well, and that's why I'm talking about it, Mass Effect isn't my disappointing game of the year so far. This one is. I'm bringing it up because it's sold #1, but guys, you can do better than this as developers, and you can do better than this as buyers. That's what this channel is about, trying to help you make informed decisions. I'm not saying if you had fun with this game you're wrong. I just don't think it really has anything interesting to offer, so for me it gets a eh. Alright, we just had somebody parachuting, now we've got somebody else parachuting, and for this I am using footage from Northern Lion's channel if you want to check him out and his friends playing the game. And, well, this is a pretty cool game. This is PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds. So what is this game? Well, this is a battle royale type game which You might have heard of the Japanese movie that some people say that Hunger Games ripped off, where you throw everybody into a big mess and they all have to kill each other until there's one person left. There are a lot of these games out there. They're all in early access. We've had them come and go. The Colon got popular for a while and it didn't. There's DayZ or whatever. I mean, I can't even keep track of them. There are so many out there, and there's only been a few that have lasted for a long time. But part of the reason that a lot of them don't seem to last is a lot of them don't ever get finished. And here's the deal. This game just recently came out in early access, but it has some jankiness for sure. Getting in the vehicles is weird. Melee system's pretty bad, but this designer, Player Unknown, who made his name doing Arma mods and things like that, while this game may not have the best name, a lot of players out there are saying the gunplay in this is already really solid. It has a spectator mode that some of the other, bigger, older games either don't have or just recently put in, and that this game is planned on being released in 6 months, actually being ready for release. Now we'll see if that actually happens, but the thing about this game is a lot of players are saying that the gunplay feels pretty good, that the game plays pretty well for as early as it is, and if they actually keep up with it and keep that promise, then this could be a pretty solid game. So if you enjoy that sort of game, we just talked a little bit ago about playing games with your friends you might enjoy, and you can play this solo against other players, or you can group up, which obviously is going to make it more fun, but overall this game seems to have a decent amount to offer, a decent amount of not quite polish yet, but again, the review I give this game is more polished than a lot of games that have been in early access for 2 years, so that's a good sign. That's a pretty long score to give it, I guess, but it's at least on par with a lot of these other games that have been out for a long time, so maybe they will keep up with that 6-month promise. And if you enjoy these sort of games, maybe this is worth checking out. If you haven't heard of these sort of games, then, if that sounds appealing to you, these battle royales to the death, where you jump in, try to gather as much loot as you can before you come across other players, and try to survive as long as you can while the map shrinks, then this game may be worth checking out. Alright, now I'm actually talking about all the AAA games first, and the reason I'm doing that is we'll get to indie games eventually that I want to talk about, but I usually cover a lot of indie games on this channel as I don't really have the resources to go out and play a bunch of AAA games or the time to do so. But next up we're talking about a big AAA game, a beautiful AAA game, Horizon Zero Dawn, and here in the background we have some footage from Bear Taffy, another YouTuber that you can check out. It does playthroughs and has a really nice voice. So Horizon Zero Dawn is that dinosaur game, the robotic dinosaur game, and well, it is gorgeous. And I was talking before about an open world sort of sandbox game not really having a lot in it. Here's the deal. This game does the open world sandbox game. It is basically the sandbox game checklist, going down through all the things that you expect to have in an open world game. And as far as that is concerned, it really doesn't do much new or inventive in that aspect. So as someone who's kind of tired of those games, you might think that I wouldn't really enjoy this game. Well, you would be wrong, because while I may be tired of Assassin's Creed and games like that, here's the deal. While this game doesn't do a lot overly new or creative as far as the gameplay loop, it does that loop so well. It's a gorgeous game. It has a surprisingly interesting story. There is kind of a big info dump near the end, but overall the story is pretty intriguing. The combat is really intriguing and well done, with all different ways you can sort of spec out and do trip lines and tie enemies down and all that stuff. It basically does the open world sandbox game better than other games do it. Now I feel like The Witcher 3 also did that, but it did that in a basically story way, making the side quest way more interesting than any other game ever by far. Almost every one of them was worth doing. I mean, maybe not some of the Witcher contracts or stuff like that, but even some of those had stories to them. And this game, basically, I don't think the story is overall as intriguing. Some of the side quests maybe aren't as cool, but it just does every aspect really well, from graphics, the sound design, to the combat system, to a story that does end up being pretty intriguing. And that's why Horizon Zero Dawn, for me, gets a greater than the sum of its parts. While all of those parts we've seen before, it does those parts all really well, and it combines to a really solid, satisfying whole. Alright, next up we're going to talk about Persona 5. Now I'm only showing the trailer footage of this because, well, the Japanese developers, much like Nintendo, don't really want you to show any footage over a certain point, and have even threatened people about that. You can check out Jim Sterling's recent video about that if you want to find out more. But here's the deal. Persona is a game that you're going to be into or not. There's a lot of strangeness to it. It's kind of this weird combination of social aspects and people being like in high school school. I mean, in some of the previous games, and then combat, and just kind of, they're hard to describe. And I highly suggest checking out ACG's review of it if you want a more in-depth review, as I'm kind of covering things very quickly here. But at the end of the day, the Persona games, if you know about them, they're something you like or hate, and it's kind of hard to simply describe what makes them appealing or not appealing. But Persona has a level of quality they seem to persist in every game, and this game continues. The biggest problem with this game, like some of the other games, is that it can be grindy, so be prepared for that. Be prepared for a grind in order to get through the game, much like a lot of Japanese RPGs. However, the reward for it is great. This game looks great, sounds great, plays great, and it continues a great tradition. And if you're intrigued with Persona, I say, well, keep up with it. So this game gets, you know, a glacial progression, but worthwhile if you're into that sort of game. Alright, well, speaking of Jim Sterling, I've got some footage here from Jim Sterling playing Nier Automata, or Nier Automata, or Nier Auto-Tomato, or whatever you want to call it. So this is a really interesting game. A while ago, designer Yoko Taro made a game called Nier, which was kind of a spin-off of a joke ending of Drakengard. And if you really kind of want to understand where this game comes from, which you don't need to in order to enjoy the game, but if you want to, I highly suggest checking out a video by Super Bunny Hop where he kind of explains the story of Nier. It's fascinating, and this game is fascinating. And here's the deal. I adore this game. I think it is fantastic. But it has some issues. So let's start off with the issues, and if those things turn you off, then maybe you want to stay away. The game starts off super fast paced. There's craziness going on. It's transitioning from different modes, from what it mostly is a 3D action game to a 2D side scrolling action game to a shmup bullet hell sort of thing, and it's nuts. And then you get into the game and there are these huge open worlds that are kind of bland. The enemy design in a lot of cases is kind of bland, except for some bosses or some cool things along then, but up until some of those points it's kind of mundane and samey, and it's kind of hard to figure out where to go. Sometimes the map is awful and there's invisible walls, and it has some issues. However, this has the, in my opinion, brilliant game design of Taro, along with the really smooth, great combat that Platinum Games usually brings to games. Platinum's had a few duds along the way, but they are the designers of Bayonetta, so, well, they also have some fantastic games along the way too. And overall, I think the combat in this game is really intriguing, and if you can get past some of those things, some of the slow points, some of the not being sure where to go, some of the kind of mundane, drab open world, and getting past the fact that this game is weird, this game is weeb, anime, this game gets into kind of philosophical issues, and some people say it only lightly gets into them, but I do think it poses some interesting questions. And here's one more thing to keep in mind. If you really want to see everything this game has to offer, you have to beat it, as far as I understand, at least 3 times. Things change, but it's still the same game, but there is also some big reveals and things. Yeah. So basically, I feel like if you can get past those points of sometimes drab environment, sometimes repetitive enemies, sometimes not knowing where to go, not a great map and whatever, there's a lot of good things to see here. Really cool combat, a really interesting upgrade system, and, well, a story that, while it may turn some people off, I think is really fascinating and really cool if you want to play through the game several times. And here's the deal. If you like the game, then that's going to be a bonus. If you're not sure about it, obviously that isn't going to be a bonus in order to be able to see all of those things. But if you're into some weird stuff and some cool combat, then I think Nier Automata is probably going to be on my list of games of the year at the end of the year. I think it's that good. So what do I give it? I don't know. A weirder than Kojima, but cool? I think that sounds pretty good. Alright, let's move on. Alright, next up, the last AAA game I'm going to cover, Nioh. Now, a lot of people have said this is basically Samurai Dark Souls. It is and it isn't. Now, it isn't in that it's not an open world, and this may be disappointing to some people. It doesn't have the cool interlooping sections and the shortcuts you can find and all of that. It's more of a, here's this section, go through it. You can go through sections again and power up and things like that, but it doesn't have that cool design where as you unlock things in the labyrinth of the layout that Dark Souls has. It does, however, have a lot of things it doesn't. A much more in-depth upgrade system and weapon system, and it is kind of a loot game where you collect a bunch of all kinds of loot and then can level it up in different ways. So there's a lot of complexities into building a character and a lot of different things you can work on in order to do that. And yeah, it's really hard. A lot of people are expecting this game to be a cheap knockoff, and really it isn't. It combines some of the aspects of, Team Ninja's combat with, some of the aspects of Dark Souls combat, and overall, this game is solid. If you enjoy that sort of thing, if you enjoy Dark Souls, you'll probably enjoy this, and some people may even enjoy it more, while it is missing kind of that feel of going through different sections and looping around. I still think, the story is based on a Japanese kind of fantasy retelling of actual historical events, so it may not have that mystique and mystery of Dark Souls, and I don't necessarily think the story is its strong point, but the combat's awesome, and if you want to get into those things, you like collecting loot, you like Diablo type games, you like working on that loot and building things up and doing combinations with character builds and weapons and trying to basically min-max and make the most badass thing, then I think Nioh's for you. So Nioh gets a not quite Dark Souls, but that's not quite bad. Now, to round out the top 10 games of the year so far, at least as far as importance, if not as far as quality, I'm going to talk about 2 indie games. Now, both of these indie games are games that I featured in Indie Games you might want to check out. I do this series of videos where I look at games available on Steam and say, hey, these games look interesting, and that's what I try to do in this channel, is point out stuff that I think looks pretty cool. And in both of these cases, it looks like I was really right. In fact, this game was so well received by a lot of people that Yahtzee, in his recent review of Wildlands, which we talked about earlier, just got bored with it and started talking about this game instead, and he doesn't often recommend games. Now, here's the deal. This is a story-driven game. There is some puzzling elements, and there are some potentially negative aspects. There are these dream sequences that you have to get through. There are some platforming sections, and they can be a little bit annoying without a lot of direction, not knowing what you're doing, trying to figure out where to go. And again, not a lot of gameplay, a few little puzzles. It's not a puzzle game. Some aspects of platforming that you probably don't really need unless you want to be one of those people that finds out everything in this game. But if you're okay with that, if you're okay with not a ton of actual gameplay, although some platforming that if you want to uncover all those secrets, and there are a lot of little interesting secret things in order to discover, not necessarily secret, but just extra, but you enjoy good writing, then oh my gosh, get this game. This game is about a 20-year-old, well, cat, but in this world there are animals, but then there are other animals that talk, and they are just like people, and just don't worry about it. But the animals in this game that are like people are more real than real life. That's my score for this game, more real than IRL, because wow, the conversations, the dialogues in this game, and I'm just showing very, very early silly stuff out before you even really get into a lot of the dialogue, because, and I am showing some more footage from Bear Taffy, by the way, if you want to check him out, spelled B-A-E-R, but this game, holy cow, this game is so good in my opinion. I watched 2 playthroughs of this game, and the only game I've ever done that before was Undertale, and I didn't actually really like the some of the gameplay aspects to Undertale. They were intelligent, but I didn't really like them, got a little bored with some of them, but thought the story was intriguing, and oh my gosh, I love the dialogue in this game. Again, there are some potential negatives if you don't really like the platform. If you really want more gameplay, then maybe stay away. If you there's some stuff in it and it gets weird eventually, I'll just say that, no spoilers, and some people may not like that. They may feel like it was a little thrown in. I thought it was cool, but the thing that I loved about this game is the actual conversations and dialogues. I live with a 20-year-old in the house, and some of the conversation, the things, I was like, oh, you got to check this out. This is so, it's so real. The problems they're dealing with, the conversations. This game is amazing, and it is one of my favorite story games of all time. And if you enjoy story games, and if that, aspect sounds cool, a 20-year-old dropping out of college and coming home, I think this game has a pretty broad appeal. Whether you're a teenager who can see some of the things and identify with a teenager, or you're an adult and you can identify with some things looking back, and sometimes maybe you think those darn kids, it's so good. The dialogue's fantastic, sometimes funny, sometimes hard-hitting, but again, one of the best story games that I have ever seen. Alright, last but not least, we have Hollow Knight, another game that I recommended and eventually got so interested I ended up buying, so this is actual footage of my video about the game, which you can check out if you want to find out more about this game. I hadn't completed the game yet when I did that. It was more of a first impressions. And this game, I love it even more. This game is so amazing, and a lot of the issues I talked about, the issues with kind of the stutter that goes on sometimes, that seems to have cleared up. I haven't had any issues with that lately. So my biggest negative about the game is gone. Look, if you like Metroidvania style games, get this game. It can be a little slow at the start. It can be a little bit difficult to grasp what's going on. I found it a little bit annoying that when you go into a new section, you don't have a map right away. But, and it seems like you get the upgrades a little bit slower than some other things. But oh my gosh, this game is so good. The way that you uncover new areas, new abilities, come across new enemies. The game looks gorgeous. It sounds great. The soundtrack is amazing. This is, I mean, this is an indie game. This was a Kickstarted game, if I remember correctly. And it is so good. This game's score is a buy this now out of Metroidvania. This may be one of the best, and if you're not familiar with Metroidvania, that is games where, you know, kind of based on Metroid in Castlevania, where you uncover, you know, you can't get to all the areas right away, but you slowly uncover and get to different areas, and you don't necessarily have to play the game in a linear fashion once you unlock abilities, and I've seen some other playthroughs of this game where people have gone through things in a different order. You don't even need to get to all the sections to finish the game. But basically, you unlock more and more abilities as you go, which helps you traverse, which helps you fight. You get stronger, and as you uncover things, you eventually, you know, eventually beat the game, I guess. But this game does it so well. I love the art design. I love the sound design, especially the soundtrack. And it just plays really solid, especially now that they resolved the issues with kind of the stuttering that it had upon launch. Go get this game. It's so good. So there you go. There are my 10 most important games of 2017 so far, and why I think this year could be the best year in gaming so far. This is just the first quarter of the year, and we've got a lot of great games. And out of those 10 I mentioned, there's only one that I don't think is good, and there's a lot of games that I think are amazing. So it looks like this is going to be an amazing year for gaming and for gamers out there. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe. You know, I really want to get some more attention on the channel as I try to do this more and more for you guys. Try to point out games that are worth checking out, find those games you might not have heard of, and try to be as consumer friendly as I possibly can be. And if you appreciate it, you know, and comment as well. Let me know what you guys want to see more of. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.